There will be Bedlam on Saturday, but already there's a healthy dose of mayhem and madness with the Oklahoma and Oklahoma State men's basketball teams. From the Dodge Sports Desk, I'm Jenny Carlson, and this is the Bedlam Nation Conversation. Joining me today are OU beat writer John Helsley, fresh off a trip to Missouri, and OSU beat writer Andrea Cohen, who is joining us via phone from Stillwater. Okay, folks, Bedlam is Saturday in Norman. Sooners are reeling and Cowboys are really soaring. OU has lost 3 of 4. OSU has won 6 in a row. John, let's talk Sooners first. Everybody sort of thought Blake Griffin's return would signal a return to dominance for the Sooners. That really hasn't been the case, though. What's going on with the Sooners?
Yeah, I think there are some tangible and intangible things going on here. Last night, I thought maybe the Sooners looked a little bit tired for the first time this year. You know, early in the season, we talked about their lack of depth and guys playing a lot of minutes. And against a team like Missouri that really gets after you, you know, full court a lot of times and puts the pressure on you. I think maybe that showed up a little bit last night. The guards just didn't play well. I mean, we've seen that at times this year. Usually one of the guys has played, you know, or maybe one or two of the guys have jumped up and played pretty well. Last night, none of the guards played well, whether it was Willie Warren or Austin Johnson, Tony Crocker, guys off the bench. Nobody really gave them a lift, and against the pressure of Missouri, that was such a vital thing last night.
How concerning is what's happened in the last couple weeks right now for the Sooners? Are they a concern on a level of 10, or is it more sort of a moderate concern right now?
I'd put it at maybe a 4. You know, I don't think there's any reason to panic. They're in a little bit of a rough spot right here. But this is the first one of these they've gone through this season. You know, every team goes through it at some point or another. You know, the bad thing is this is not a great time to be going through you know, what they're going through. You've got the Big 12 tournament next week. You've got the NCAA tournament hanging out there. And so they really need to get this thing righted and get the momentum going the other way in a hurry.
Andrea, let's talk a little bit about the Cowboys. Travis Ford has shaken up the lineup of late. Is that why the Cowboys have won 6 in a row?
I think that definitely has something to do with it. Kind of a lot of things changed. They've won 6 in a row partly because they reached a portion of their schedule that had, you know, some winnable games after kind of a tough first half to the Big 12 season. But yeah, they're playing a lot better. They're playing a lot differently. And I do think that has a lot to do with who he's got out there. And, you know, Keaton Page playing a lot of minutes. Nick Sidorkis is playing a lot of minutes. Marshall Moses is playing well and playing a lot of minutes. So all those things have kind of changed who they are.
One of the main shakeups with that lineup, Andrea, was Obi Manello out of the starting lineup. Don't they have to have him play some pretty solid minutes for them the rest of the way, even though he may not start?
I mean, I think he's a really important guy for them, and it is interesting because when you go from kind of being the leading rebounder, leading scorer on the team to all of a sudden coming off the bench and some nights playing 10 and 15 minutes, it's a very strange role change, but they've been winning. But yeah, he's still important to them. I mean, if their big guys get into foul trouble, he needs to come back in there and rebound, which is, you know, he's one of their better rebounders still. And you know, at the end of that K-State game, he hit a huge three-pointer there at the end of the game. So he's still an important guy, but it is a very different role he's playing now.
Well, for both of you, let's talk a little bit about heading into this Bedlam game, NCAA tournament hopes right now. John, where do the Sooners stand in terms of NCAA tournament and seeding?
Well, it's a lot different, I think, today. You know, yesterday we were still talking about a number 1 seed. I think right now they're going to have to go earn that back again, and maybe the only way they can do that is to win out. They've got this game with OSU. They got the Big 12 tournament. I think they may have to go and win the rest of their games and kind of reprove themselves against teams that have beaten them, Missouri and Kansas possibly in the tournament. I think that would be the best way. I don't think I would leave anything to chance.
Andrea, what about the Cowboys? What's their NCAA tournament outlook look like right now?
I think they're still definitely kind of a bubble team. More and more people think that they're getting in. That win over K-State was really, really big, very critical win for them. You know, as long as they don't get blown out at OU and they win a game in the Big 12 tournament, they should be just fine, I would think. Although, you know, there's no guarantees, and it's not like you know, there's absolute certainty, and they could, you know, they could lose in the first round of the Big 12 tournament and still get in. I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily that they still need to win games, but kind of more that you don't want too many more losses, almost more than the wins that you really need at this point. But yeah, I think they're on the bubble. I think they're in good shape.
Let's talk about best case, worst case scenario for these two teams. Andrea, we'll start with you. Obviously, I would think a worst case scenario would be not getting into the NCAA tournament, but Is there a seed that the Cowboys could ascend to? Could they be an 8, a 7? I mean, what's sort of the range for them? Best case, worst case scenario for the NCAA tournament?
I mean, right now I think Joe Lunardi has him around a 10. That's what he had him yesterday. Jerry Palm had him around a 10 or 11, kind of in that ballpark. They could still play their way lower, and they could still play their way higher. I would say probably within a range of 3 on either side. To play much higher than like a 9 seed, I would think that they would need to make the finals of the Big 12 tournament, which would be very tough. But that would probably be where I would see them, to get much higher than a 9 or so.
Okay. John, what about the Sooners? It seems like worst case scenario is not missing the tournament at this point, but what is sort of that range of seeding for the Sooners?
Well, we talked about a number 1 seed, and I think that's still a possibility. If they stumble much more here, I think maybe about the lowest they could fall maybe would be a 3 or so. They've been such a good, strong team for such a long time this season. I would see them right now at about a 2. If they just kind of win some games, lose a game or so here in the next week, I think they're probably still a 2. But number 1 for high, I'd say a 3 for low.
Is part of the best case scenario for the Sooners getting to Kansas City?
Yeah, I think so. And that's been the thing that for, almost for 2 months now, people have pointed to, hey, Sooners to Kansas City, fans to Kansas City. And, all of a sudden there's some doubt about that. You've got Kansas, who has played pretty well until last night. Big hiccup for them at Texas Tech. But you've got Missouri also that, would love to play there. And obviously those 2 schools are close. And so I think all 3 of those teams are in the mix for Kansas City. And there's no guarantee that 2 will go to Kansas City. So that's the thing that right now kind of hangs in the balance.
All right. We need to take a break. On the other side, we talk about increasing crowd sizes and what a crowd could mean on Saturday in Bedlam. We're back on the Bedlam Nation conversation from the Dodge Sports Desk. I'm Jenny Carlson, joined by John Helsley and Andrea Cohen. And John, let's turn to something OU related here for a second. It'll be Senior Day on Saturday during Bedlam. What are you anticipating that atmosphere and that scene looking like down at the Lloyd Noble Center?
I would expect probably the best atmosphere of the season. One, it's Senior Day, but it's also a Bedlam game, which kind of really amps it up a little bit. Taylor Griffin is one of the seniors, Austin Johnson, Omar Leary. Those are the 3 guys. But, Taylor's a guy that's really been kind of a face of the program, for several years now. I think people will want to show up and really, kind of salute him. But also, I think there's going to be a sense among the Sooner fans to really show up and, try and get this team going again. I mean, send them forward with some momentum. So I would think it would be a great crowd when you factor in the Senior Day, Bedlam. In some ways, it's probably going to be Blake Griffin's last game in Lloyd Noble as well.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, Andrea, let's talk a little bit about crowds as they relate to Oklahoma State. The Cowboys had some really good crowds their last 2 home games. Why did people finally start showing up in the numbers that they did?
I think it was kind of a combination of things. I think, all of a sudden they'd won, 4 in a row when they first came home and played Texas, and everyone knew Texas was a really big game. And then also the school sold some student tickets for $10 a piece. Which seemed like, their student sections have been great their last 2 games. Their student section was really packed and really loud, and I think that really made a difference. Not only that they were cheap and, kids who didn't already have them could just go buy them, but I think it kind of made people feel like, hey, they're making an effort to fill this place up and it's important. So I think that really, really made a big difference with those, they sold 2,000 for the first game. That's a lot.
For both of you, Andrea, we'll start with you. What do both of you anticipate as far as crowds for the Big 12 tournaments? Andrea, do you feel like that there's going to be some carryover amongst Oklahoma State fans who want to get to Oklahoma City and watch the Cowboys play?
I think that the Oklahoma and Oklahoma State fans will bring good crowds, but I was talking to some people yesterday about how badly ticket sales are down kind of across the board for the rest of the Big 12 teams, I guess. Each school gets an allotment of 1,100 tickets, and they're just getting returned in droves because people can't sell them. I think just with the economy being bad, people aren't taking that trip. So I think it'll be really interesting. I think when OU and OSU play, there'll be some decent crowds, but I don't think that people are going to be traveling with their schools the way that we've seen in the past.
John, what's your impression of crowds and how that's going to play out come Big 12 tournament week next week?
Well, Andrea hit on some of the points there. I think we're going to see a lot of crimson, we're going to see a lot of orange, we're going to see a lot of Jayhawk blue, you know, because those people will show up and probably snatch up whatever tickets are sitting out there to be had. So I think the place will be pretty much full for the most part. I would be disappointed if not. You know, locals will show up and grab tickets at the last minute probably, which is good for the two state schools because, you know, then they'll have, you know, real partisan crowds. I mean, you'd expect that anyway, but this is a chance to really show up and support your team.
Okay, we need to take another break, and when we come back, we'll talk about team MVPs and who's been the most valuable players this season for the Sooners and the Cowboys.
My all-new Dodge Journey took me from a 400-square-foot studio apartment.
Call Mario. Hello? Yo, man, I'm on my way.
To a new crib downtown.
Play memo.
Staff meeting, 9:30.
Now this house is mine. The higher you go, the sweeter the journey. Introducing the crossover that's ready for anything. The all-new Dodge Journey. If you can dream it, do it.
We're back on the Bedlam Nation conversation from the Dodge Sports Desk. I'm Jenny Carlson with Andrea Cohen and John Helsley. Let's talk finally to both of you, team MVPs. Andrea, you get to go first on this one. Byron Eaton controls games. James Anderson hits shots. Marshall Moses seems to play well when the Cowboys win. So who is Oklahoma State's MVP this season?
It's kind of funny. We asked Travis Ford that after the Colorado game, and that was kind of his answer was, well, I don't know. I mean, we couldn't do what we do without Byron, and, you know, we couldn't do what we do without Marshall, and, you know, it's kind of this very funny group that it's really hard to pick out one guy. I would say that Byron Eaton over the stretch of the season, I mean, I think he's probably your most valuable guy. He really does control the tempo of games. Kansas State, that was absolutely on display when he, you know, went to the free throw line 15 times, made 15 free throws. You know, every point they got seemed to be off a pass, you know, a pass or a pass from him. And so he's just been, you know, very, very important to them and run the team pretty well. Starting toward the beginning of Big 12 play, I would say he's been really good for them. Then the last, you know, 5-6 games, James Anderson's been really good. I mean, really, really good. You know, averaging 20-something points a game. Really hard for people to stop. He's going to the hole more, not just settling for three-pointers. He's been really good. You know, Marshall Moses, their big guy, is, you know, he's their big, and he's 6'6", and he's, you know, playing really well for them. And nights where he doesn't play well, for the most part, they're not very good. So it's kind of hard to say most valuable, most important, you know, kind of however you want to define it. It's one of those three. I don't know who it is.
All right. Well, while Andrea is still letting her final vote be determined, John, is it much more of a slam dunk for the Sooners? Is this for certain it's Blake Griffin as the Sooners MVP this year?
I think it is. There's a chance for someone to sneak up. I want to let you know that.
Okay.
Obviously, Blake Griffin, the player of the year probably nationally. He's got to be the team MVP. But a guy who's going to be critical to them down the stretch is the trainer, Alex Brown. If this team is going to go forward and do things well, Austin Johnson is going to have to be on the floor. He hasn't practiced much. He has ankle, shoulder, back problems. They got to get him healthy for this critical stretch. We saw last night how important guard play is. You're going to see teams that can do that in the tournament. So I think Alex is going to have to do his best work as a Sooner trainer. All
right. Well, Andrea and John will continue to provide in-depth coverage of the Cowboys and the Sooners. For all the news and analysis, stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahomans.